Hi, and welcome to Ginger English. I'm Marcus, joined as always by Sarah, and today we have a B1 level podcast for you. Now, before we get into today's story, I want you to imagine something. Imagine you've been writing letters to someone for 10 years, 10 years, and in all that time, you've never met them, never seen their face, never heard their voice, but somehow, they know you better than most people who see you every single day. They know your fears, your dreams, your embarrassing middle school stories. They know the name of your childhood dog and why you cried at the end of that one movie you pretend you never watched. And then one day, you decide. You decide it's time. Time to finally meet this person face to face. So you buy a plane ticket, you pack your bag, you fly across the country, and you walk into that coffee shop, heart pounding, hands a little shaky, and the person standing there is not who you expected, not even close. That's where our story begins today, and I promise you, by the end of this episode, you will feel something. Maybe it's sadness, maybe it's hope, maybe it's both at the same time, but you will feel it. So grab your coffee, find a comfortable spot, and stay with us, because this one is going to stay with you. Our story is about a woman named Megan. She's 29 years old, lives in Austin, Texas, works at a small graphic design company, loves her cat, hates traffic. Pretty normal life, right? But there's one thing about Megan that isn't so normal. For the past 10 years, she's been exchanging letters, real, handwritten letters, with a man named Dave. It started as a school project when she was 19. Her college professor gave the class an unusual assignment: find a pen pal and write to them for one full semester. Most students went online and found someone quickly, but Megan took it seriously. She found a program that connected people through actual paper letters, old school, and that's how she found Dave. He was from Seattle. He worked at a local library. He loved old jazz music and books about history. He wrote long, thoughtful letters, not just "how are you" stuff, but real questions. Things like, what moment in your life changed the way you see the world? Megan answered everything honestly, and she asked questions back. The semester ended, but the letters didn't stop. They kept writing, week after week, year after year, 10 years, hundreds of pages, and somewhere along the way, Megan realized she had real feelings for this person, so she made a decision. She was going to meet Dave. She wrote him an honest letter, asking if they could finally meet in person. 3 weeks later, one short answer came back. Come to Seattle. I'll be at the usual coffee shop, Saturday, 2 o'clock, and so she booked her flight.
Okay, so let me paint you a picture. It's a Saturday morning in November. The sky over Austin is still that warm Texas blue, the kind you don't really appreciate until you leave. Megan is standing in her apartment and her suitcase is open on the bed. She's been packing and repacking it for the last hour. She keeps taking things out, putting other things in, then going back to the first things. Classic nervous packing. On her nightstand, there's a stack of letters, not all of them. She has hundreds, but her favorites. The ones she's read so many times, the paper is soft at the edges. She picks one up and reads a line quietly to herself. It's a line Dave wrote maybe 4 years ago when she told him she was thinking about quitting her job to start her own design studio. He wrote, the people who wait for the perfect moment usually find that it never comes. You already have what you need, Megan. Just trust it. She kept that one on her fridge for 2 years. She's nervous, really nervous. And here's the thing, she's not normally a nervous person. She gave a presentation to 40 people last spring and didn't even blink. But this is different. This is the person who knows her, really knows her. What if it's strange in person? What if the chemistry that exists on paper just disappears the moment you're sitting across from each other at a table? She's imagined him, of course. 10 years of letters, and you start to build a picture in your head. She imagines Dave as tall, a little quiet, the kind of guy who listens more than he talks. Warm eyes, probably wears flannel shirts because, well, Seattle. She smiles at herself in the mirror, tells herself to calm down, zips up the suitcase, and heads to the airport. The flight from Austin to Seattle is about 4 hours. 4 hours of Megan sitting by the window, watching the landscape change. from dry Texas flatlands to mountains and green forests, and then the gray, cloudy sky of the Pacific Northwest. She doesn't watch the movie, she doesn't sleep, she just thinks. She thinks about the very first letter she ever wrote to Dave. She was 19, sitting in the campus library, and she had no idea what to say. So she just started with the truth. She wrote, "I'm not sure how to do this. I've never had a pen pal before, but my professor says honest letters make the best letters. So here's something honest. I'm a little lonely lately, and I think writing to a stranger might help." 3 weeks later, Dave wrote back, and that was the beginning of everything. The plane lands just after noon. Megan takes a rideshare to a small coffee shop called the Blue Kettle. The city passes by the window. Gray skies, wet streets, tall green trees. Beautiful. Actually, she can see why Dave loves it here. The car stops. She sits for just one more moment. Then she takes a breath, opens the door, and walks inside. The Blue Kettle is a cozy place. Small, warm, a little dim. The kind of coffee shop where the chairs don't match and the walls are covered in old photographs and local art. It smells like espresso and cinnamon. Soft music plays in the background, something old, something jazzy. Megan almost laughs at that. Jazz, of course. She looks around the room. There are maybe 15 people inside. A young couple by the window, a woman working on a laptop in the corner, a group of college students near the back, and then, near the middle of the room, a man sitting alone. He's older than she expected. Maybe 60, maybe a little more. Gray hair, glasses, a dark green jacket. He has a cup of coffee in front of him, and his hands are folded on the table. He's looking right at her. Megan stops. She doesn't move for a second. Her brain is doing that thing where it tries to figure something out really fast, but can't quite get there. This man is not Dave. Dave is 31. This man is not 31. The man sees her hesitation. He gives a small, careful wave, like he was expecting exactly this reaction. Megan walks over slowly. She stops at the edge of the table. "Are you—" She starts. "I'm Robert," the man says quietly. "Dave's father." The words land slowly, like they have weight. Megan pulls out the chair across from him and sits down. Not because she's ready. She's definitely not ready. But because her legs feel suddenly a little unreliable. "I don't understand," she says, and Robert nods, like he knew she would say exactly that. He wraps both hands around his coffee cup. He takes a breath, and then he starts to talk. He tells her that Dave passed away 2 years ago. A brain aneurysm, fast, unexpected, no warning. He was at work, at the library he loved so much, and then he was gone. Just like that. Megan sits very still. She's listening, but part of her brain is somewhere else entirely, running back through every letter from the last 2 years, looking for signs she missed, wondering how she didn't know, wondering why nobody told her. "After Dave died," Robert continues, "I found your letters, all of them. He kept every single one in a box under his bed, in order, with dates." He pauses. "I read them." Megan doesn't say anything. "I know I shouldn't have," Robert says quickly, "but I was not doing well. Losing Dave was—" He stops, looks down at his cup. "He was my only child." The coffee shop is still making its soft noises around them. Someone laughs across the room. The jazz keeps playing, but at this little table in the middle of the Blue Kettle, everything feels very quiet. "So you kept writing," Megan says. It's not really a question. Robert looks up at her. "I kept writing," he confirms. "Not right away. It was about 3 months after he died. Your letter arrived, you didn't know, of course, And I sat down and I wrote back. I told myself it was just once, just to not leave your letter unanswered. He shakes his head slowly, but then you wrote again. And I wrote again. And he trails off.
So let's just stop here for a second because I need you to really sit with what just happened. Megan flew across the country to meet a man she'd been writing to for 10 years, and the man sitting across from her isn't that man at all. It's his father, a grieving father who for 2 years pretended to be his dead son because he couldn't let go. Now, I know what some of you might be thinking. That's wrong. That's a lie. She deserved to know the truth. And yes, you're right. It is a lie, a big one. But here's the thing about grief. It doesn't always make people do logical things. It doesn't always follow rules. Sometimes grief makes people hold on to things they know they should let go of, because letting go feels like losing that person all over again. Robert wasn't trying to hurt Megan. He was trying to stay connected to his son. Every letter Megan wrote, every question, every story, every honest piece of herself, it kept Dave alive in some small way for Robert. He could read her words and imagine Dave reading them too. He could write back and imagine Dave's voice coming through. It was wrong, but it was also deeply, painfully human. Now, back to that table at the Blue Kettle. Robert has just trailed off. Megan is sitting very still, and then she asks the question that's been sitting in her chest since he said his name. "Which parts were you?" she asks. Robert looks confused for a moment. "The letters," she explains. "Which parts were really you, and which parts were Dave's voice? Were you just repeating things he used to say, or was it you?" Robert is quiet for a moment. Then he says, "At first, I tried to write the way Dave would have written. I used his phrases, his way of asking questions. I had 10 years of his letters to you as a reference. I knew how he sounded." He pauses. "But after a while, it became harder to separate. Some of what I wrote was Dave, and some of it was me." Megan nods slowly. She's processing. You can almost see her brain working through everything. Every letter, every piece of advice, every question that felt so perfectly right, every line that made her think, this person really understands me. How much of that was Dave? How much was Robert? And does it even matter now? "The line about trusting myself," she says suddenly. "When I wanted to start my own studio, was that Dave or you?" Robert looks at her for a long moment. "That was me," he says softly. "I lost my wife 12 years ago, and after she died, I waited. I waited for the right time to do so many things. I waited too long." His voice drops just a little. "I didn't want you to make the same mistake." Megan stares at him, and for the first time since she sat down, something in her face shifts, just slightly. The shock is still there. The hurt is still there. But something else appears too, something that looks a little like understanding.
Here's what I keep thinking about when I imagine this scene. Two people sitting in a coffee shop. A young woman who flew across the country to meet someone she loved, in her own quiet way, for 10 years. And an old man who lost everything that mattered to him and then, in the strangest possible way, found something to hold on to. Neither of them planned to be here. Not like this. Megan orders a coffee. She needs something to do with her hands. The waitress comes, smiles, leaves. And then Megan says something that surprises even her. She says, "Tell me about him, the real Dave. Not the letters, just him. Who was he?" Robert looks at her like she just gave him a gift he didn't expect to receive. He straightens up a little in his chair, and he starts to talk. He tells her that Dave was a quiet kid, not shy, just thoughtful. The kind of boy who would sit and watch a situation carefully before deciding what to do. He collected old maps, not for any particular reason, he just loved them. He had maps of cities that don't exist anymore, maps of roads that were never built, maps of oceans with sea monsters drawn in the corners. He kept them all rolled up in tubes in his closet. He loved his work at the library. He said it was the best job in the world because every day someone came in looking for something, an answer, a story, an escape, and he got to help them find it. He made playlists for people, not for streaming, actual playlists written on little cards with album names and track numbers. If someone came in sad, he'd slip a card into the book they were checking out. "For when you need it," he'd write. That's the kind of person he was. Megan listens to all of this without saying a word. At some point, her coffee arrives and she wraps her hands around the warm cup but doesn't drink it. She just listens. And as Robert talks, something interesting happens. She starts to cry, not dramatically, not the kind of crying where you have to leave the room. Just quiet tears, one at a time, like they're escaping before she notices them, because she's realizing something. She never knew Dave. Not really. She knew the version of Dave that existed in letters, careful, written, revised. She never knew the man who collected old maps and made playlists for strangers. She never knew that version, and now she never will. But Robert knew him. Robert carries all of that with him, every single day. And suddenly, Megan understands something about those 2 years of letters that she didn't understand before. Robert wasn't pretending to be Dave to trick her. He was keeping Dave's spirit moving, keeping it warm, like a fire you don't want to go out. She wipes her eyes quickly, looks across the table. He sounds like someone I would have really liked, she says. Robert's face does something complicated. His eyes go a little bright. He would have liked you too, he says. Very much. He talked about your letters all the time. Before. He used to say, Robert smiles just barely, he used to say you were the most honest person he'd never met.
Now I want to talk about Robert for a minute, because I think it's easy to look at what he did and just call it deception and leave it there. But if you really think about it, if you put yourself in his position, the picture gets a lot more complicated. Robert was 62 years old when Dave died. His wife had already been gone for 12 years. Dave was his last person, the last family he had, and grief at that level, the kind where you lose your only child, that's not something most of us can fully imagine. Psychologists actually have a specific term for it. They call it bereaved parent syndrome, and studies show it's one of the most severe forms of grief a human being can experience. The loss doesn't follow the normal stages, it doesn't move forward in a predictable way. It stays, it rewrites everything. So there's Robert, 2 months after the funeral, sitting alone in his house in Seattle. Dave's room is still the same. His map collection is still in the closet. His library card is still on the kitchen table. And then a letter arrives. A letter from a young woman in Texas who has no idea that the person she's writing to is gone. What does Robert do? Most people would write back, one last time, to explain, to close the chapter properly. And Robert did try. He sat down and started to write exactly that letter, but here's what stopped him. He started reading Megan's letter first. Really reading it. She was talking about a difficult week at work, a project that fell apart, a moment where she doubted herself completely, and then she wrote, just at the end, almost like a footnote, I keep thinking about what you said last spring, that the only real failure is not trying at all. I think about that a lot when things get hard. Robert stopped, because that line, that piece of advice, wasn't Dave's. It was something Robert himself had said to Dave when Dave was maybe 16 and had just quit the school soccer team and felt terrible about it. Dave had written it in a letter to Megan. Dave had passed it forward, and now Megan was holding it like a small light in a hard week. Robert sat with that for a long time. Then he picked up a pen. He told himself, just one more letter, just enough to help her through this rough patch. But then she wrote again, and he wrote again, and the conversations got deeper and more honest, maybe even more honest than they'd been when Dave was alive, because Robert was older and he'd lost more, and he understood certain things about life that Dave at 31 simply hadn't had the time to learn yet. Robert knew he was doing something wrong. He knew it the whole time. Every single letter, but he also knew that those letters were the 1 hour a week where he felt like himself again, like a father, like someone who still had something useful to give. Back at the Blue Kettle, the afternoon light has shifted. They've been sitting there for almost 2 hours now. The coffee cups are empty. The noise of the shop hums quietly around them, and something in the air between Megan and Robert has changed. It's hard to describe exactly. The shock is still there. Megan hasn't forgotten what happened, and she hasn't decided how she feels about all of it yet, but the sharp edge of it has softened just a little, because she knows more now. She knows who Dave was, she knows who Robert is, and she knows that the letters, even the ones written by a grieving father pretending to be his son, were real in the ways that actually matter. The advice was real, the care was real, the questions were real. Then Megan says something that changes everything. She reaches into her bag, her carry-on, the one she packed and repacked that morning in Austin, and she pulls out a letter. One letter, folded in thirds, a little worn at the creases. She places it on the table between them and slides it toward Robert. He looks at it without touching it. "What is this?" he asks. "It's a letter I wrote last week," Megan says. "I wrote it before I came. I wrote it to Dave." She pauses. "But I think maybe it was always meant for you." Robert looks at her for a long moment. Then he picks up the letter. He unfolds it slowly, carefully, like it might break. He starts to read. "We don't hear everything in the letter. Some things are private, but we know a few things from what Megan says later. She wrote about what the letters meant to her. All of them, from the very beginning. She wrote about the loneliness she felt at 19 when she sent that first one. She wrote about all the moments over the years when a letter arrived at exactly the right time, with exactly the right words, and how she never really understood how that kept happening until now. She wrote, "I don't know how to explain this, but I think two different people loved me through those letters, and I'm grateful for both of them." Robert reads the whole thing. He takes a long time. When he finishes, he folds it back along the same creases and places it carefully on the table. He doesn't speak for a moment. Then he says, "I'm sorry, Megan. I should have told you the truth much sooner. I know that. I was afraid that if I told you, I would lose." He stops, starts again. "I was afraid I would lose the last thing that still felt like Dave." Megan nods. She's quiet for a moment. Then she says, "I'm still figuring out how I feel about all of it. I'm not going to pretend I'm completely okay with it, but I came here today thinking I was going to meet one person, and instead I met someone I didn't know I needed to meet." She looks at him directly. "Dave was lucky to have you." Robert presses his lips together, looks down. When he looks back up, his eyes are wet. "Thank you," he says. It comes out barely above a whisper. They sit there together as the afternoon light fades outside the windows of the Blue Kettle. Two people who lost something. Two people who, against all logic and reason, found something too.
So, here we are, the end of the story. And I've been sitting with this one for a while, honestly, because it's not a simple story. It doesn't have a clean, easy ending where everything is resolved and everyone is happy and the music swells and you close your laptop feeling great. Real life doesn't always work like that. And this story, even though the specific details are fictional, feels very real because the emotions in it are real. The grief is real. The loneliness is real. The way we hold on to people after they're gone, sometimes in ways we know we shouldn't, that's real too. Megan flew home to Austin that evening. She sat by the window on the plane again, the same seat, the same dark sky outside. But she was a different person than the one who had made the trip that morning. Not broken, not completely fine either. Just changed. She later said, in a journal she kept, that the hardest part wasn't learning that Dave was gone. The hardest part was grieving someone she had never actually met. Someone who was real and not real at the same time. Someone she had loved in the particular quiet way you can only love a person you know entirely through their words. She grieved Dave, the Dave she had imagined, the Dave from the letters, the Dave who asked beautiful questions and never knew she was falling for him. And at the same time, she felt something unexpected, a strange, cautious warmth toward Robert, not the same feeling, something different. The feeling of meeting someone unexpected in a place you never thought to look. As for Robert, Megan did write to him again. About a month after she got home to Austin, she put a letter in an envelope and mailed it to Seattle, just to say, "I'm still thinking about everything. I don't have all the answers yet, but I'm glad I came," Robert wrote back. He always does. And that's something, isn't it? Before I let you go today, I want to leave you with one small question. Just something to carry with you. Think about the people in your life who have shaped you. The ones whose words you still hear in your head when things get hard, the advice that arrived at exactly the right moment, and ask yourself, do those people know what they gave you? Because sometimes the most important thing we can do is just tell them, write the letter, make the call, send the message. Don't wait for the perfect moment. We've already heard where that leads. This has been Ginger English. If this story moved you even a little, please hit that like button. It genuinely helps us reach more people. Subscribe if you haven't yet, and share this episode with someone who you think would appreciate it. We'll be back soon with another B1 level story. Until then, take care of yourselves and maybe write someone a letter today.